Hi, my name is Krista Coffey, and I'm the Director of Student Activities here at UNT. In this session, I'm going to talk to you about how to translate your experience in co-curricular activities, including student organizations, into the job search. But much of what I'm discussing can be applied to other scenarios, including applying to grad school, applying for awards, things like that. So today is about translation, not exaggeration, not fluff, not resume tricks. You've already done the work through your leadership roles, so this session's about helping you articulate it and helping employers and graduate programs see it. So before we get started, go into this Canvas module and download two documents related to this presentation. One's the reflection worksheet, and the other is the job description sample. You're going to use the reflection worksheet throughout the presentation and the job description sample for another exercise. Go ahead and pause the video here and download those two documents. All right, let's jump in. So a resume is often your first and sometimes only chance to make an impression. Most employers spend seconds, not minutes, reviewing it, and that means clarity matters more than quantity. It's a translation document, and your interview turns those resume bullet points into professional stories. You know, I've often heard students say, I was just in a student organization, or I was just the president, as if these experiences don't matter. Whether you realize it or not, you've done and learned a lot while serving as a student leader. And all these things, combined with your classwork and other experiences, make you more employable. So before we go into depth, I want to do a quick and easy reflection to get us started. On the reflection worksheet you downloaded, go to Reflection 1. If you would, go ahead and write 2 to 3 words you want an employer or graduate program to associate with you after reading your resume. Go ahead and pause the video and take a minute to write the words under the Reflection 1 section. So this helps you work backwards. You want to be sure that these words are represented in your bullet points. So what are this session's outcomes? By the end, you should be able to articulate and identify transferable skills developed through co-curricular and leadership experiences, including student organization involvement. Next, translate leadership responsibilities into career-ready resume bullets using employer-aligned language and the SOAR method. Next, align personal experiences with employer-valued competencies identified by the National Association of Colleges Employers, or NACE. And finally, to prepare structured interview responses that demonstrate transferable skills using the STAR method. So again, while my focus is going to be on applicability within the job search, you can also apply all of these concepts to applying to grad school, an internship, or whatever your next move is. Now, before we get started, I want to recognize that we have a diverse group of student leaders participating in this session. We've got different majors, different student organizations, officer positions, classifications, and different next step goals represented. As such, I'm going to try to gear my presentation broadly so that the concepts apply to everyone. So that means you may have to make some bridges between concepts based on your unique needs. So first, let's talk about transferable skills. What is a transferable skill? Well, it's an ability that comes from knowledge or experience. It's a skill that can be carried from one context to another, from one position to another. It's helpful on a broader level compared to a technical skill, which help you accomplish specific tasks. You can learn it in many different settings, from class to work to student organizations to community service, internships, and more. So by virtue of being in a leadership role, you likely already possess several transferable skills that employers want in their employees, to at least some degree. And the good news is that you can always strengthen them and develop new ones to ensure that you're highly employable in a number of positions and fields. So why are they so important? Well, unfortunately, with so many college graduates these days, obtaining a degree and having a good GPA are likely not the only factors that are going to land you a job. Employers are looking for more, and your involvement and ability to articulate what you learned during your involvement will give you a leg up. Transferable skills make you more marketable as a candidate in the job search. over those who haven't learned those skills? Think about it this way. If you can use a skill in one situation, you can probably use it in another, even if the work appears to be unrelated. So for example, if in an interview you can provide an example of how you resolved a conflict within your student organization, this will show the employer you have experience in the skill and can use it in a future job situation. And if you can come in with the skill, the employer doesn't have to train you in it, which saves them time and money. So that makes you more competitive, even for roles where you may not meet every technical requirement. Let's go ahead and watch a quick video to understand why involvement matters.
Why should I hire you? It's a question that every college graduate will have to answer in some way after they graduate. It may not always be asked this way, but it will be implied in every question they're asked at the interview. Why should I hire you? For some students, the question may cause a sense of panic. Many falsely assume that a diploma is all they need to get a great job. They've heard people say, all you need is a college degree. It doesn't really matter what your degree is in. That is false. The truth is a little more complicated. If you use college as an opportunity to grow and develop, you are more likely to become the kind of person that employers want to hire after college. Simply put, your most important project in college is you. So what skills do employers want? The National Association of Colleges and Employers asks them every year. Here is what they found out: verbal communication, teamwork, problem solving, setting priorities, finding and evaluating information, quantitative reasoning skills, computer skills, writing and editing, and influencing others. Now, where can you gain these skills? Stephen F. Austin State University and Campus Labs conducted a national study on this issue called Project CEO, Co-Curricular Experience Outcomes. This study looked at how students develop the skills employers want, and some of the results may surprise you. We asked more than 17,000 students at 40 institutions where they could learn these skills. Without exception, their classes was the most common answer. This makes a lot of sense. Classes are supposed to prepare you for success in life, and every student takes classes. But not every student will participate in a student organization or an internship. We investigated these experiences outside of classes that may contribute. These were internships, on-campus jobs, off-campus jobs, and co-curricular experiences. Co-curricular experiences meaning optional experiences outside of the classroom in which learning can occur, like student organizations, campus publications, student government, fraternities, sororities, intercollegiate or intramural sports, or academic groups and honor societies. When we asked which experiences outside the classroom help students to develop employment skills, co-curricular experiences were the most common answer more than half the time. Students developed teamwork, decision-making, obtaining and processing information, problem-solving, verbal communication, planning, organizing, and prioritizing. In 3 skills, internships got the most response: career knowledge, computer proficiency, and writing and editing. In 2 skills, off-campus jobs got the most response: sales and influence, and analyzing quantitative data. To see the impact that co-curricular programs make, let's look at how 3 hypothetical students developed the 6 skills that co-curricular experiences impact most. The first student doesn't participate in co-curricular experiences at all. They just go to class and go back to their room. The second student has been involved on campus for 2 years. They spend at least an hour a week involved on campus. The third student has been a leader on campus for 2 years. They run meetings, they help their organization set goals, and accomplish them. We asked each of them to rate their skills on each of these areas: verbal communication, teamwork, problem solving, setting priorities, finding and evaluating information, and decision-making. What does this mean? The more involved students were, the more likely they were to say that they were gaining these skills. This leads us to an interesting question. How involved do you have to be to get the benefits of participation in a co-curricular experience? Let's look at 4 more students. This one is somewhat involved in a single organization. This one is somewhat involved in multiple organizations. This one is very involved in a single organization. And this one is very involved in multiple organizations. We asked them to rate themselves on each of the 6 skills that co-curricular experiences impact most: verbal communication, teamwork, problem solving, setting priorities, finding and evaluating information, and decision making. So what does this mean? Well, this seems to suggest that what really matters is your level of involvement. The learning benefits of being very involved in one organization are essentially the same as those gained from being somewhat involved in multiple organizations. Students who were very involved in multiple organizations perceived the greatest benefit. much more than students who are only somewhat involved. This also supports the claim that it is the depth of your involvement that matters. A word of caution: although involvement in multiple organizations is beneficial, it's also important for students to find a balance and not overextend themselves. So what can we take away from this? First, we need to help employers understand the benefits of hiring involved students, since they tend to have many of the skills that employers are looking for. Second, internships are great, but not every student can get an internship. But any student can participate in at least one co-curricular experience. Third, students work more hours than ever before, and this presents many challenges, but it may also present opportunities for students to develop career skills from their jobs on and off campus. So if students want a great job after college, they'll need the skills that employers want. Involvement outside of the classroom can be an engaging and fun way to develop these skills.
Leadership roles are great practice environments. You made decisions, managed people, handled conflict, and solved problems. All of that's relevant to potential employers. So you're making yourself more employable by being involved in co-curricular activities. But that doesn't do any good if you can't, one, identify the skills you've learned that are transferable to a job, and two, articulate those skills to a potential employer. So in this session, we're going to start going through the process of articulating your transferable skills by first identifying your involvement activities. So step one, what I want you to do is identify what you've done in college. List everything: the officer or leadership roles, including formal titles and informal leadership, activities, projects, memberships, awards, etc. You don't need to provide any details just yet, just a shorthand inventory of your activities, like on this slide. If someone trusted you with responsibility, even briefly, don't hesitate to write it down. You can always come back to this step later if you want to add more, but you'll need at least a few activities now to build on for future reflections. So go ahead and pause the video here and take a few minutes to write as many things as you can on the brain dump step 1 section of the provided worksheet. Great. So now from the list of things you've done as generated in step 1, pick one thing, preferably a student organization leadership role, since that's the focus of the session. Titles don't tell employers everything, but responsibilities do. So for that one thing you selected from step 1, I want you to add some details. What were your responsibilities? What were your job duties of that position? What decisions did you make? What tasks did you complete? What did you improve or accomplish? For now, like in the sample I provided on this slide, it can be pretty broad. And again, we'll work on adding even more details in a bit. So go ahead and pause the video here and take a few minutes to write as many things as you can in the brain dump step 2 section of the worksheet related to that role you selected from step 1. All right, so this is where students often stop short. Let's take it to the next step. I want you to stop and think about what you're learning in your student organization role. In executing the job duties and performing the tasks that you just came up with in step 2, what skills did you learn or strengthen as a result? If something was uncomfortable, stressful, or challenging, that's probably a transferable skill that you worked on. So go ahead and pause the video here, and I want you to take a few minutes to write at least 3 learned or strengthened skills in the brain dump step 3 section of the worksheet, based on the information on job duties, tasks, etc., that you identified in step 2. All right, so my guess is that most to all of the skills learned in your student organization that you identified in step 3, and even the ones you didn't list, but I know you're learning, are transferable and tied to some of the more common transferable skills listed on this slide. Just know, if you develop them in a student organization, you can apply them in a job, which means you want to promote them to a potential employer. This is just the beginning. After this session, I encourage you to continue the brain dump by looking back at your full range of collegiate experiences that you started in step 1. Go back and review class syllabi to remind yourself about class projects. Look at officer job descriptions. Think about community service you've done. Study abroad, requirements for awards and accolades, and run through steps 2 and 3 with each of those. So you've begun to identify some of the skills you've learned in your collegiate experience, both in and out of the classroom. From the employer perspective, we know that they're looking for certain skills because they're asked. As mentioned in that video you just saw, NACE, the National Association of Colleges and Employers, annually compiles the top skills employers seek in new college graduates. These are highlights from employers across the country, and it shouldn't surprise you that they don't change significantly from year to year. Your goal is to connect your experiences to this language, to these skills, and to the skills needed for a specific position. So next, I'm going to have you prepare an example that shows a potential employer that you have experience with that skill. Because that's how employers see transferability between what you've done previously and what you may be able to do in a job. To show you what I'm looking for on the next step, I've selected 4 transferable skills and drafted an example of how a student leader may have used that skill in the context of their student organization. So let's take a look at them. Problem solving or critical thinking. An example that you may have used in your student organization is you identified why member retention was low and you brainstormed ideas to increase that retention. For teamwork and collaboration, an example of use in a student organization is that you led a committee to plan the annual banquet. For interpersonal skills, maybe you resolved a conflict with another officer. And finally, for leadership, maybe you mentored a freshman, showing them how to execute officer duties to prepare them for their future leadership. All right, so in thinking about the skills you identified back in step 3, I want you to create one example of use for each of those 3 skills. Or if you can think of a better example using that skill from another activity, maybe a different student organization or from a job, feel free to use that instead. So while right now, we're only going to focus on the skills you identified in step 3, the end goal is for you to be able to prepare an example or a story that showcases your use of each of the 7 top skills that employers want in new college graduates. You never want to say to a potential employer, I'm a team player, and stop there. You want to be able to describe a specific example of a time you exhibited teamwork skills. That's how employers see transferability between what you've done and what you may be able to do in the job. So go ahead and pause the video here and take a few minutes to write an example of a time you used each of the 3 previously selected skills. If you need to go back a slide to see the examples, feel free. So when looking at the top 7 skills employers want 2 slides back, what are the ones you may not have an example for? If you can't think of something you've done to learn or strengthen that skill, don't worry. You can do something about it. For example, take a LinkedIn learning course. Put yourself in a situation that will require you to get experience with that skill. Or maybe talk to a mentor about how you can develop a skill. It's never too late to develop transferable skills. Now, side note, now that you've identified some skills you've learned and you know the most common skills that employers are looking for in new college grads, I encourage you to add them to your LinkedIn profile if you have one. Skills listed without evidence don't mean much, so once you've added those skills, seek endorsements and continue to build on your experiences to validate them. All right, now that you've identified some of the transferable skills you have and need, let's move on to the next step of articulating this to a potential employer. This will help you prepare your resume or look at your current resume and think about how it can be improved to show your co-curricular experiences. Now, I'm not going to discuss the basics of resume prep like formatting and style, especially because some career fields have different standards and expectations. A creative field, for example, might provide more flexibility in how to showcase your resume content. So instead, I encourage you to turn to the Career Center to secure this kind of advice. So I'm going to discuss some tips on content, as that should be fairly standard across fields. Now, it's okay to have a generic resume on hand, but once you apply for a specific position, you want to tailor your resume to it to ensure you're putting your best foot forward. You're going to look at the position's job description. What skills do they care about? You're going to identify keywords and phrases from the job description to identify what's important to the employer. And you'll identify the transferable skills and experiences you have based on that. You'll pull from experiences brainstormed on previous slides to determine which you can connect to the job description. And if you ever feel like you need help, have a supervisor, advisor, or mentor help you connect the skills identified in that specific job description to your leadership or work experiences. In your resume, make sure you address as much of the job description as possible relative to your experiences. Now, note that employers often skim resumes, only looking at each for a few seconds. So first, you don't want your formatting and style to be so complicated that they can't follow along quickly. Make sure it's easy to follow and read. Second, you want your experiences to stand out quickly and connect to the job description before they move on to the next resume. And because you may only have a few seconds to stand out, we want you to emphasize only the skills and experiences that are relevant to the job in your resume and eliminate the fluff and ensure employers see the important things quickly. I should also mention that a growing number of companies use software to match your resume with open jobs, which is why it's so important to tailor your resume to that specific job and use the keywords and phrases they use in the job description when you're articulating your experiences. All right, so let's talk about writing performance statements or the specific bullet points in your resume. We're going to use what's called the SOAR method to help you write bullets that provide information about your specific experiences and skills. All right, S stands for statement, the action. What did you do? It's important to use an action verb here. Occurrence, the frequency. How often did you do it? Amount, the scope. How much or how many? Basically, when it benefits you, it's really helpful to quantify. And finally, the result or the outcome. What happened because of it? All right, we're going to run through 3 examples. Number 1, why is make sandwiches for customers a bad performance statement? Well, first, as it's currently written, it's a content-specific skill or a technical skill that you really wouldn't want to include on a resume unless you're applying for a job in a sandwich shop. But also, it lacks a lot of detail when there's so much more to it than that. And a way to tie into skills a non-sandwich shop employer needs to know about you. So in this job making sandwiches, you likely learned or developed some transferable skills like teamwork and interpersonal skills. For example, did you build rapport with over 30 customers each shift while preparing made-to-order sandwiches in a fast-paced environment that required collaboration with a team of coworkers? Looking at the SOAR method, S for statement. What did you do? Well, you prepared made-to-order sandwiches. Occurrence. How often? Each shift. Amount. How much or how many? You helped over 30 customers. The result. What happened because of it? Customers were satisfied because you built rapport with them and you contributed to collaboration with your coworkers. Moving on to the next example, you did more than ran meetings. Like number 1, you can add a lot more detail to showcase your transferable skills. You likely organized and facilitated weekly meetings for 35 members, which provided everyone with up-to-date information regarding upcoming events and activities. Breaking it down to the SOAR method, S, statement. What did you do? You facilitated meetings. O for occurrence. How often? Weekly. A for amount. How much or how many? 35 members. R for result. What happened because of it? Members were informed about what was going on in the organization. Now let's look at the final example. How do we take organized philanthropic events into the SOAR method? S, what did you do? You organized philanthropic events. O, how often? Monthly. A, how much or many? 500 attendees, and you raised over $5,000. R, what happened because of it? Well, children's charities benefited from your fundraising events. So whenever you write resume bullets, try to avoid vague and passive verbs like assisted, responsible for, and helped, and instead use more active words like contributed, or facilitated, or planned. As the O and A in SOAR suggest, use numbers and quantify when it helps showcase a scope that other applicants may not have. So how many members or officers? How many attendees? How much money did you raise? How large was the budget you oversaw, etc. Don't forget to include accomplishments and improvements made because of your actions or under your leadership. For example, while you were president, did you or your organization win an award? Did you increase membership or retention? You can still model those bullet points using the SOAR method as a guide. Now, will every bullet in your resume follow the SOAR method? No, but the bigger concept here is that I want you to be more intentional in crafting your bullets, connecting them to the skills you have that are needed in the job. Let's practice what you've learned about writing a good performance statement or bullet point tailored to a specific job. So go ahead and pull up the job description sample document you downloaded at the start of the session. First, review it to identify what skills they care about. Go ahead and stop the video here to read it. Second, use the highlight function to highlight the key words or phrases that indicate what's important to the employer. As an example, one thing I highlighted is administrative support, which is number 4 under key responsibilities. Go ahead and stop the video here and take a few minutes to highlight the key words or phrases. Third, you've already brainstormed some experiences and the skills learned from them. You've identified several examples of these things on the reflection worksheet, so pick one. Now find a connection between one thing in this sample job description and an example of a skill you've learned or developed or a role you've had. So to build on the example of highlighting administrative support in the job description, let's say that as chess club secretary, it was my responsibility to keep record of meeting attendance for members. So go ahead and stop the video here and identify a connection between the one thing you highlighted in the sample job description and a skill you learned or developed, or perhaps a role you've had. And finally, using what you identified in number 3 above, write a bullet point using the SOAR method. Now, of course, I know you could use AI to assist with this, but let's try it on your own to make sure you understand the concept behind writing strong bullet points. Plus, you know the specifics of what you've done, whereas AI doesn't. So using my example, I'm going to take the key responsibility of administrative support that's in the job description and use the SOAR method to write a bullet about my responsibility as chess club secretary. So my resume bullet is maintain biweekly meeting attendance records for a 40-member organization, tracking absences and notifying the president when members surpassed the constitutionally allowed absences for active membership. I've got the S, that I maintain attendance records and track absences. I've got the O, that the meetings were biweekly. I've got the A, that I'm doing this for 40 members. And I've got the R, that excess absences are reported to the president, presumably so that they can implement accountability in the membership. Now go ahead and stop the video here and take a few minutes to draft a bullet point on your reflection worksheet in the Let's Practice the SOAR Method section. It's okay if it's not perfect, and what is your first draft? All right, as you reviewed the sample job description, what are some things that came up that you may not have originally considered to be an important part or valuable addition to your resume? You've drafted your first SOAR bullet point. Congrats. Now you just need to keep going to create resume content that will showcase the transferability of experiences to the job. Here's an example of how this looks. Again, the format will vary based on the field you're going into. And as I mentioned previously, I really encourage you to get feedback on formatting and style from the Career Center. Note here the action verbs, the scope, and the outcomes, and review this section from an employer's perspective. What skills are obvious? Things like organizing, communicating, mostly written, accountability, and planning stand out in their role as chess club secretary. Now, if you look at a bullet from an employer's perspective, and you have to guess what skills the applicant brings to the table, then that bullet needs work. Regardless of the field you're going into, these are suggestions that apply across the board. And honestly, this could easily be a resume that you submit to grad school, although again, make sure it's tailored to what they're looking for in a student. All right, moving on. A well-written and organized resume is what's going to get you to the interview, but your stories and experience shared in the interview is what's going to get you the job. Now, I'd argue that the first step to preparing for the interview is to know yourself. In the context of what we've been talking about today, specifically, that means being able to identify and then articulate what you've learned in your co-curricular experiences is what's going to set you apart from other applicants, many of which haven't gotten involved in college. You're going to be asked questions that assess your experience with transferable skills that are important to the employer. For example, tell me about your experience with conflict management, or tell me about a time you worked on a team. Now, you've started to identify these things in the session and can go forth after and build on them. So to prepare, think through specific scenarios you've encountered, especially using the keywords from the job description and the list of skills you know employers are looking for. Think of skills they're looking for and brainstorm those situations and examples you've encountered in college, whether that be as a student worker or maybe in your student organizations. Similar to the SOAR method to write performance statements on your resume, there's a method that will help you create the best interview answers to the questions that assess your skills. And it's called the STAR method, and it helps you tell structured professional stories. So S is for situation. Explain the situation you encountered to provide context to your answer. T is for task. Elaborate on what the challenge or problem was or what your goal was, as well as your role. Action. Explain how you handled the situation, overcame the challenge, or tackled the goal, focusing on the skills you used. And R for result. Discuss the outcome, what you achieved, or lessons learned from your actions. Anytime you can give a specific example of a time that you exemplified use of a certain skill, you'll do more to show a potential employer of the transferability of your skills to the job. So rather than saying, I'm a good leader, which frankly anybody can say, you're instead giving an example of a time you exhibited being a good leader using the STAR method. So let's give you a concrete example. This is a question you're going to easily get asked in most entry-level job interviews. Share an example of a time when you faced a difficult problem. How did you solve this problem? So let's break it down using STAR. Situation. When I was president of ABC organization, the vice president, who was in charge of coordinating our biggest event of the year, wasn't taking care of his responsibilities. About a month before the event, he all but disappeared and seemingly hadn't done anything to plan it. The task. This event was important to myself and the organization, and I knew I had to make sure it would still happen. Action. I spoke to the VP. It turns out he had some family issues he was dealing with, so didn't have time for the organization in that moment. I told him I understood and that he should focus on his family and we'll make sure that the event happened. I determined what tasks were needed to be completed and in our next officer meeting, delegated them among us. Result. While it was a stressful month, we successfully hosted the event. We even had the largest attendance we've had in years. So this is a strong answer because it shows empathy, problem solving, accountability, and leadership under pressure, all transferable skills. Now you practice. How would you answer the question based on an experience you've had? You're going to outline your response in the reflection worksheet. Let's practice the STAR method. I encourage you to put the full story together at some point when preparing for your next interview, but for now it's okay to provide an outline of the information you want to include. Identify the situation, the task, the action, and the result. Go ahead and pause the video and jot down a few notes on the worksheet about how you'd answer it using the STAR method. Great. Now that you see how to craft interview answers, I encourage you to prepare answers related to the other skills you know the employer is looking for using the STAR method and practice them. Because in an entry-level interview, you're likely to be asked about your communication style, leadership style, a time you worked on a team, etc. Again, identify what the employer is looking for and use your brain dump to think about why you're qualified and would be the best person for the job. What are the stories you want to tell? So I know I went through a lot today, and that preparing for the next step, whatever it is, can be stressful. But you don't have to, nor are you expected to, prepare for it alone. And know that it doesn't end today. I know we didn't have time to go into things in more depth, but hopefully you'll use this as a springboard to start thinking more intentionally about how your co-curricular experience can be translated into helping you secure a job, an internship, admittance into grad school, an award, whatever it is you're ready for next. You have access to a lot of resources, resume reviews to mock interviews and more, all from the Career Center to help you secure the position that's right for you. And don't forget to also ask for feedback from supervisors, mentors, professors, and student organization advisors. Have questions about formatting resumes and conducting interviews relative to your field? Again, I'd encourage you to reach out to the Career Center. Have questions about translating your co-curricular experiences into your resume and interview? Well, feel free to reach out to myself or anybody on the student activities team. We're happy to provide our perspective. And be sure to participate in the career coaching meeting at the end of the series to take advantage of having both a Career Center and Student Activities staff member provide you with tailored suggestions. So whether you realize it or not, you already have relevant experience based on your work with student organizations and other co-curricular activities. Don't minimize all the great things you've done and experiences you've had. Instead, it's your job to learn how to translate and articulate what you've done. And that's what's going to separate you from other applicants.